Trust This Robot here, and we have AI in the news for November 9th through November 15th. So we're starting out with GPT-3 generator, and they have created something called Jukebox. It's their Jukebox project where they've been scraping millions of songs from the internet and creating deepfake music where it sounds just like the artist from a song. So you could do a song that sounds like Simon and Garfunkel, or one that sounds like Celine Dion, or up here they're saying one that sounds like Frank Sinatra. And this made me think about some of the stuff we talked about last week with holograms. So I could just imagine that they do a hologram of Frank Sinatra. They use this jukebox project and have a hologram of him singing in concert, and it sounds just like him. What would be interesting would be who profits off of that, who owns the rights to his voice and his persona. But I could totally see that coming down the road. So the next one that we have, I always try to do something about art. So this one would be that the Vatican Library is using artificial intelligence to ward off hackers for their digital art collection, which is a very large collection, growing at 6,000 volumes per year and over 80,000 manuscripts. So that's interesting that they're using AI to kind of track everything. I could see this going to the blockchain eventually, which we'll get into that in another video. So this one to me sounds like it's right out of the Terminator. They're basically talking about autonomous robots, and the government has come up with their new ethical guidelines for autonomous robots because they are soon feeling that a quarter of the army will be autonomous systems. And this is being reported by Sky News. Which, you know, in the Terminator, it's Skynet. So I'm just going to play a tiny little section of this, you know, maybe like a minute.
The Department of Defense has issued a new draft of the ethical use of artificial intelligence in warfare. And Daphne Wazidi-Net is here with us to break this down for us a little bit. Daphne, just start with some of the highlights in the draft.
Right, so last week the Department of Defense published a draft document that had a few rules and guidelines for an ethical deployment of artificial intelligence in warfare. So that's important because it's the kind of regulation that could then rule out or regulate the way that we use what we commonly know as killer robots, or perhaps more precisely autonomous and semi-autonomous weapons.
All right, so I'm going to put a link to this below, so if you want to watch the whole thing, you can. She lists out the guidelines that they've presented in the document. So this one, we have Sony is getting into the drone game. I guess their drone's going to be, this is with AirPeak. The reason I'm bringing this one up is because they are going to have tons of AI in their drones, which will enable the drones to be able to, on its own, detect things like trees and birds and buildings and move around them so that they don't crash. You know, so you don't have to spend between $500 and $2,500 on a drone and then have it crash into a tree and you lose it. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think some drones already do have it, but they're putting a focus on this. So Sony describes the drone as being developed with the field of AI and robotics, which along with the aim to enable drone use where it was previously difficult to do so. Let's see, small UAVs have gotten smarter and smarter, able to avoid obstacles, recognize other flying objects, and navigate between buildings without any intervention from their human operators. So that's pretty cool. So Apple's first ARM-based 13-inch MacBook Pro is here with their M1 chip. So the reason I put this one in here is because the M1 chip, which is made by ARM, and ARM is being acquired by NVIDIA, has an entire neural section to their chip. So what was interesting is Apple's previous model had multiple chips, with each chip designated for its own use. The M1 chip is all compact into one chip, and a portion of that chip handles all of the neural information. So it's specifically designed for ML work, machine learning work. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that they've been calling it the Mac chip, hence M1. but it is in fact an ARM chip, which is acquired by NVIDIA. So I thought that was interesting. We're now segueing over to Boston Dynamics robots, which might soon have a new owner, as SoftBank reportedly considers a sale. The reason we're segueing that is because SoftBank is an investor in, I believe it's NVIDIA. Yeah. So SoftBank is considering reporting this to Hyundai. So Hyundai could potentially be the new owner of Boston Dynamics robot dogs. Interesting. I'm not quite sure why Hyundai would want a robot dog, but that's interesting. So Google is now going to be asking and allowing their Android users to label all their images, which is essentially training their AI. This article also talks about, when you're trying to log into something and you get that that thing that pops up that's like, click how many of these images have trees in it, or click how many of these images have a stoplight. You're essentially training their AI. That's all you're doing. So they're kind of forcing you, when they do that, into training their AI. So this I thought was interesting. It says it's time to talk about the carbon footprint of AI. We started out this week talking about the GPT-3 generator, and so I thought this was kind of an interesting circle back around. One of the most elaborate deep learning models designed to produce human-like language, known as GPT-3, requires an amount of energy equivalent to the yearly consumption of 126 Danish homes and creates a carbon footprint equivalent to traveling 700,000 kilometers by car for a single training session. So that is interesting. Yeah. And wrapping it up with crypto, which we do every week. We talked a few weeks ago about how PayPal was going to be allowing people to buy and sell crypto, and it is now official. On November 12th, you can go onto PayPal, get yourself some Bitcoin if you'd like. And that is all I have for you for this week. We will be back next week with more. I hope you have a great week.